Hello. Hello, everybody. I am so excited to be back in a space with privacy today for this live stream. Oh, privacy, how I love you so much. Me and privacy, we are tight. So, yeah, back in private today to get to live stream. Last week, I was at my childhood home with my dad walking through and my brother in the next room, and it was incredible. I believe the term is age regressed, like when you go into the presence of people who have known you for a long time and you feel the age of like when your densest history is with them. And so like with my dad and with my brothers, like that's obviously childhood, and I'm in the home where I grew up, and yeah, it was intensely uncomfortable. And at the end of it, honestly, like it was only like less than an hour long because that's how uncomfortable I was. Like, but at the same time, it was almost an hour long. And I live streamed while I was deeply uncomfortable for almost an hour. And it wasn't perfect. There were things that I like looked back on later and was like, oh wow, like you could really see like how uncomfortable I was. But I did it. I did it. And that has felt most impactful of all. And so I'm so grateful for last week's live stream for like putting into perspective how comfortable I truly have become in private, right? Like, wow, like doing this in private like feels so good. Like almost no fear whatsoever, and that feels incredible, especially coming off of the heels. You gotta see this. Mungo, did you fall out of the window? She didn't mean to. It was an accident. She forgot, and she fell. Oh my gosh. She was just laying there. I didn't even see her move, and she just like falls off the windowsill. She's not the most coordinated little baby that there ever was, but she's real sweet. So yeah, just kind of basking so far in how clear I am thanks to the little bit of resistance of being uncomfortable and unclear last week, like trying to hold on to my train of thought while I had like all of these emotions spiking. Like my face was hot, I felt red, I like not mad or anything, just like deeply uncomfortable. And yeah, it's crazy like how going into certain spaces can bring up like a whole treasure trove of unfelt feelings, maybe. And that's definitely what came up for me last week. And especially on the heels of the Leo new moon, which ties in perfectly with like what we're here to talk about with the Aquarius full moon. The Leo new moon was a soul infusion, new moons always are, of like wanting to shine our heart, our light even more brightly into the world, like our individual unique essence that can help uplift other people. We want to do more of that. That's like the Leo new moon general energy. And coming up to the Aquarius full moon, it really is about seeing all of the pieces of our programming that is still in place that is preventing us. Like, why aren't you already shining like that? Just shine your light, just do it. There's reasons. There are probably good reasons why you're not doing it yet. And when anybody asks you, like, you know, what's stopping you? Why aren't you doing it yet? Like, I personally wouldn't hear that as like confronting so much as like, for real, what are those deeper reasons around why you're not already shining like this? And I'm reminded of the book, The Courage to Be Disliked. I don't know if I've ever mentioned that on a live stream before, probably have. I mean, it was very impactful at the time when it came into my experience, and it's been coming up a lot more lately for me personally. And I think it also kind of ties back to the Taurus North Node journey of like standing in our own self-worth and our own value, claiming our power, kind of letting go of needing other people to affirm our power for us. That Scorpio South Node end. And so the courage to be disliked sets us free. In that book, it's set up as a conversation, which is like really interesting. I think it's just a fun way to take it in, between like a old Zen master, I think is how they described him, could have been a little bit different, but ish, and a young pessimistic kid who is just very unhappy and unfulfilled in life and feels justifiably unfulfilled in life. And so is basically voicing this and asking questions. And Maddie also, while I'm thinking about it, I hate to like take away from people buying this book, because if you can, if like you have the money to buy the book and you want to buy it, I do encourage you to do that. And she's put the link there where you can like go and buy the actual book, which I'm going to do. But so far, I also listened to it as a free audiobook on YouTube. There's a lot of those floating around, and I also have like a playlist on my channel of all the free audiobooks that are out there on YouTube. Yeah, so there's the free audiobook version. And Maddie, maybe you even put that playlist of like all the ones I've collected, because I keep adding to that for those who feel like they legit cannot afford the book. Like that does not justify like a limitation to absorbing this amazingly powerful information. And in this book, they set it up as a conversation, and the basis, like the premise of the philosophy that comes forward is that all problems in the entire world are interpersonal problems. And let me say that again, like all the problems in the entire world are interpersonal problems. They are problems between me and another person. That's the only way you would have a problem, is if there's a problem between you and someone else. And so by the end of it, basically what they lay out is that if you have the courage to be disliked, then you have no problems. Essentially, like if you're not trying to like toe the line and keep other people happy, it really does free us up to flow our own individual essence into the world without worrying how other people are going to receive it, or to try to control the way that other people receive us, to be able to voice our truth. And if they don't understand it, it's not my task to help them understand it. It really isn't. That their understanding is none of my business. That's kind of the way that they talk about in the book, The Courage to Be Disliked, is that, you know, there's all of these tasks floating around in the world to help, you know, yourself and help other people and fix this problem and do this and whatever. And so often we can burden ourselves down carrying other people's tasks. And that this like courage to be disliked, it helps us recognize like what is my task and what is not my task. And that is a very helpful place to start with this Aquarius full moon, because it is like that Leo new moon of like really deeply desiring to shine even more brightly into the world, to like add even more love into your family and your community and the world at large. Like really, I could be using all this love that I feel in my heart and giving it to the world and like uplifting them too. And then there's all the reasons why we're not doing it yet. And so with an honest genuine curiosity, why aren't you doing it yet? And how many of these reasons have to do with, like I said, like every time my dad walked through the room, my blood pressure like shot through the roof. Like it was very like adrenaline almost would start pumping. Like I was so scared by his like mere presence in the room. He's not even saying anything. He's just like walking through. And it was so like my body had such a strong physical reaction to that, that again, then it's like extremely difficult to try to hold a stream of thought and like live stream and continue talking about Jupiter retrograde in Aries. I'm like, who cares? I'm having a freak out over here. Like it was extremely intense. And again, it's like, okay, so why does his presence in the room cause my body to flood with so much energy that I can barely do like what I was born to do, like the Leo part of like the shining your light and putting your heart out there for other people to enjoy along with you, putting your imagination out there for other people to enjoy along with you. It's like, why was his presence so intensely distracting from shining my light? And that is a question that I could unravel that, and I have on layer after layer after layer after layer of like just the dynamics between me and my parents in general, and how most of us, by the time we get to adulthood, we have some sort of sense of wanting to like make our parents proud of us. And there is definitely an Aquarian type vibe around the fact that, I mean, they, like my parents and my brothers too, for that matter, they are all extremely practical people. Like, I don't know if they identify as like atheists necessarily, but like not spiritual, not religious, like taking no part in any kind of like a philosophical type approach to life. They're very like numbers and like, yeah, just very earth realm individuals. And that's okay. But I definitely felt like an outcast, like sitting in my parents' living room with my dad, like walking through the room. I felt so weird. I felt so different. I felt like overwhelmed by how different I was from him, and that he's witnessing like the real version of me, which I doubt they ever have, you know, like, because I just don't, I'm authentic. Like I don't lie to them by any means, but they don't ask, and I don't answer questions that don't get asked, or at least I try to. You know, that's a work in progress. Um, yeah, like I'm a teachaholic. Like I love to teach people things, and so I have a tendency of answering questions that nobody asks to hear about, and that can get you into some hot water. So with them, I just generally let them talk about themselves, and I ask them questions about their work as it feels relevant, and they generally don't ask me things, and when they do, I answer honestly. And it's so funny, like the other day I went over there to use internet, and Jake was like, so what are you, Jake's one of my brothers, like, so what are you doing today? And I tell him like I'm, you know, sending in my new hire paperwork for like my new job thing. It's not really a job, it's more like a contract position, but it is technically a job. But anyways, doesn't matter. So I told him my new job thing, and I'm submitting this grant idea. And the only thing anybody said was Ross, and he was like, what the hell do you even do? And that got a big laugh. And then the conversation moved on to something else. Like that was not a real question, which is fine. But that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Like they don't show an interest. And that used to really bother me. I don't know why we're going down this tangent, but here we go. That used to really bother me, that they like didn't show an interest in who I truly am. And as I've like basically it started back, I mean, shortly after my spiritual awakening, when I kind of like got mad. I got mad to a point of saying like I'm not going to spend my Thanksgiving at home with my family. I'm going to spend it in Dallas, where I was living at the time, with my friends, and not come home for Thanksgiving. And that was the first time I'd ever done that. Thanksgiving is my favorite holiday. And choosing to skip that with them, to me, was like giving them the finger kind of like all at once. I was mad, and it felt good on some level to kind of take a stand and choose myself and like choose to spend my holiday in the way that I wanted to. But since then, I mean, I've obviously moved back here and I live in the same town as all of them, and just kind of like gotten to the point where, yeah, like I take an interest in them and let them ask me whatever they want to ask me. And generally I don't think that they have the words, and I don't willingly share very often, which is weird because with my friends, like I'm inspired to share things like all the time, and videos, like I'm inspired to make videos all the time. And when it comes to something that I would want to say to them, it's instantly like this flood, like what I had with my dad, where like it's like almost instantly triggering to think about telling them something. And so I just have kind of let that go, just let go of them seeing my unique self. Like they're seeing it and it existing and me embodying it are all three very different things. So separating those and like being okay with the fact that they don't get it, I think it happened a lot through being able to find people in the world who do get it, right? Like people in the world who, when I'm inspired to say something, they come back and they're like, wow, oh, that's so full of love, or that's amazing, and that got me thinking about this, and that's a new way to look at it, and I never looked at it before. Like people who respond with the same love that I feel like I'm giving when I share one of my insights or one of my thoughts, or taking the time to share my energy with someone. Like if somebody doesn't want it, like dude, then yeah, don't come around me. And that that feels again like being set free on another level of like being okay with embodying my individuality myself versus like being so hung up on, like I spent a good big chunk of my 20s being brokenhearted that the world does not understand me. I was so miserable over being so misunderstood. It was like the drum that, oh my God, I just beat it and beat it and beat it and beat it. And I feel like at the end of it, like definitely finding Abraham Hicks, and starting listening to that as far as like what even are our emotions, like what is the guidance that that feeling is really telling you. And basically how Abraham Hicks describes negative emotion is it's the gap between what you and your human form are currently thinking and what your inner being / higher self is thinking about the exact same thing that you're looking at. So while I was depressed for a decade and a half over being so misunderstood, my inner being, like the only reason I was in pain was because my inner being is standing there knowing that I am fully understood by spirit, by my own soul, by source energy, which runs through every single person on this planet, every single life force on this planet. I'm fully understood on that level. And so to try to get other humans to reflect that back to me is a losing battle. That's my own personal opinion. This is me having like spun my tires in that mud for long enough to say, okay, fine, I don't think this works. I don't think having them understand me is a productive measure of my success. Like I think maybe my version of success needs to be defined differently. It needs to be more about what I'm able to feel about myself, because the deepest part about feeling misunderstood for me was I didn't understand me, and I was looking for other people to understand me so that I could understand me. I was like, I think secretly waiting for somebody to come along who could explain me to me, and nobody could, and I was just so mad at them for not understanding me. And deep down, I think I was mad at myself for not understanding me and the gap between how I was operating compared to how my higher self, my inner being, was operating at all that same time. Loving me, knowing my value, knowing my worth. That's always there. But sometimes we look at things through a lens of conditioning instead of like through an open heart of being 100% connected to our inner being, knowing the value and goodness of who we really are. Sometimes we do look through our own conditioning, and that has everything to do with Aquarius and this full moon that's coming up. Is Aquarius is an energy where it is both the conditioning that we absorb and the lifelong process of then unraveling that conditioning apart from who you really are. Because it's not nearly as simple as being like, oh, there's your piece of conditioning. Let's take that out and throw it away. And now here what remains is all you. It's like every fiber of your being it contains both the conditioning and the real self, and it's like a conjoined twin, like every single one of those pieces, and trying to separate where is the conditioned part and where is the real me. That is deep work that takes feeling into your emotions and feeling for yourself, like what is truly resonant, meaning what speaks to your soul as truth versus what feels like fear or worry about what other people are going to think. Like all of my experience with my dad, that was like my freaking conditioning, like full on display right in front of my eyes while I'm trying to hold a stream of thought and speak about Jupiter retrograde. So yeah, it was a moment of recognizing, kind of like getting to see this next chunk of conditioning that is going to be being unraveled. Like that's an ongoing process, obviously. I think it kind of lasts the rest of our life, like I said. But yeah, I do think that we all have the capacity to be able to see our conditioning for what it is, as far as like energy that we soaked up along our path that truly doesn't belong to us, but that maybe we've made a habit out of it anyway because the other people that we spent time around, they had habits like that. None of that's wrong. And if anything, I kind of think your conditioning is a big part of your spiritual path and spiritual purpose. Like when they talk about healing ancestral lines, like healing lineages, like being a soul who was called forward into your family to heal your family line. There's a lot of different ways that people resonate with it. But what that actually means, like in an earth energy practical step by step by step, step number one, you inherit all the pain of all the people that have come before you, same as your mom did, same as her mom did, same as, or your dad, or whichever side it's coming from. Like, so did they. They inherited all the pain of everybody that came before them, and whatever they hadn't healed yet, they gave to you. And healing that family line means figuring out how to detangle what is the conditioned expectation that is causing this pain, as opposed to who is my soul asking me to be. Like one of the Aquarius reminders out of the book Self-Care by the Signs by Valerie Tejeda. That's a free book on Audible. If you have an Audible account, it's one of the freebies. Highly recommend. In her Aquarius chapter, her Aquarius reminders are: you are allowed to move to the beat of whatever drum you choose. Number two is embrace the things that make you unique, which it's like, again, I feel like I've found more pain around my uniqueness, I think, historically, and finding the beauty in my uniqueness feels a lot more like new territory, like being able to see the beauty in my uniqueness, even in a situation where I'm surrounded by my family who doesn't get it at all. Like that would absolutely be new territory. And I don't think I've ever pulled that off. So, yeah, maybe that's something to aim for. That feels nice. Number 3, Aquarius reminder, lean in towards the things that inspire you. That's a great way to hear like what your soul truly thinks is what kinds of things inspire you. At the heart of Aquarius energy is humanitarianism. Like there's a fierce individual spirit to Aquarius that I think, yes, like the individual Aquarius energy wants that for themselves, but even greater than that, it's like by claiming it within yourself, you're also signing a permission slip for every single person you ever encounter that they're allowed to claim theirs too. So that feels like really big work. But again, it's like all inside of us as far as claiming our own individual essence in an out loud kind of way, not a way where we're hiding it away from the world, like, you know, doing our secret talent in our bedroom by ourselves, like actually putting it out there, embracing the things that make us unique. Number 4, you are capable of doing big things. And number 5, life is full of beautiful possibilities. I absolutely love these. Like, not that we came here to fix a broken world. We didn't. It's not broken. It's actually better than it's ever been, if you can believe that. Um, Depends on what frequency you normally live on, what your experience of it is. But the top frequency of this world is higher than it's ever been because of the massive amounts of healing and transformation that people on this planet have done. Like individuals that have sat and cried their tears and embraced themselves and sought the help that they needed along the way, took advantage of free resources everywhere you could find them, and invest what you have, what you can afford into yourself, into unlocking even more of your own unique brilliance. So there has been so much of that work take place on this planet that there's a shift happening. And I think all of us are a part of it to some extent, whether you're embracing your own uniqueness or not, because one of the pieces that is most helpful to me to embrace my own uniqueness is when somebody else doesn't get it. You know, like feeling misunderstood is powerfully motivating. That's actually where my journey of self-awareness, like where it actually began, was I felt deeply misunderstood by somebody that I saw no way out of my relationship with them. And so because I was going to have like an ongoing relationship with this person, I really wanted to figure out how to help them help me help them, like to understand each other. Like how can we find some common ground? How can we come to the middle? Because what you're asking me to do is just never going to happen. So what can I say? How can I explain this? And I open up that email to like start writing it to her, start like trying to put my thoughts together. And I realized like I can't help her understand me because I don't understand me. I don't know why I'm like this. And at the time, I had a friend in my life who was like super into Myers-Briggs, like had been for years. And I had taken the test a little while before that, and I kind of like dove back into my Myers-Briggs type and went as far with it as I possibly could. She was right there to get to ask questions to. It was amazing. And then once I felt like, okay, I understand my type, and then I found cognitive functions underneath that. And that was like kind of just the beginning of like, it just was a landslide of like Myers-Briggs into this, back into StrengthsFinder, into astrology, into human design, into Gene Keys, like understanding myself. And brick by brick, thought by thought, revelation by revelation, tier by tier, I feel like I have built an understanding of myself that's not complete, it's not perfect, but it is so much more robust than it used to be, to the point where now when other people don't understand, they're not there yet. Like, they just don't get it. That's okay. It like literally doesn't touch my sense of self-worth sometimes, right? Like other times I'm trying to do my thing. I'm actually trying to flow my like unique, brilliant energy or whatever. And then my dad is like walking through the side of the room. Yeah, obviously, like it's a work in progress, as it all always is. Um, ooh, Sharon, I love that you added we are sovereign. And sovereignty has been coming up a lot lately, for me, around like a piece of this Aquarius full moon is that it's happening like right next to Saturn. And Saturn having to do with like our sense of responsibility into the world, like what did we come to build day by day, um, as we're here with our life. And Saturn in Aquarius is kind of a serious placement as far as like, what did you come to contribute to humanity? What did you come to use your individuality for? And that's not intended to be heavy or putting pressure on you. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. Um, it's kind of like a serious soul level question, especially the full moon happening only a couple degrees from this Saturn. How are you spending your energy, and how do you feel about the bang for your buck that you're getting as far as how you're choosing to invest your energy? Do you feel like you're moving the needle forward on what you came here to contribute? Or do you feel like you're kind of spinning your wheels, giving your energy to things that just won't move forward, no matter how much you throw at them, no matter how many times you try to explain it? I just can't create the change that I want to create. But I'm guessing for everybody, like if we're really being honest, like no one is in a completely dark situation. Like everybody has like some things that we're giving energy to that are spinning our wheels, and some things that we're giving energy to that come naturally to us, that feel really good, that maybe feel healing, that feel like our energy is like boosted, that it puts a charge on our battery. Like there's stuff in both piles. And Aquarius energy, like we said, like as far as a lifetime's worth of kind of sorting out which pile is which, like how often are you pouring your energy into things that feel like no matter how much you give, it just doesn't ever get to where you want it to be, versus basically when we pour our energy into ourselves, when we like give to our own healing journey, and then get to witness the space that we're able to hold for other people because of the healing that we've accomplished, the healing that like the gaps that we closed within ourselves, and the responsiveness that that lets us have, instead of just raw reactivity to whatever unhealed wounds we were carrying before. um, there's levels and levels and levels to this stuff. So no matter no matter how much we've healed or not, that's why I say we've all played our part, and we all are still playing our part, because the ones that are refusing to see our unique brilliance, like that lights a fire under our ass to get us serious about seeing it for ourselves. Okay, fine, you won't see how good I am, then I'll have to show you. And then when you go to show them, it's like, oh, wait, maybe I didn't see it either. Maybe you do. I mean, maybe you can just like put it on display immediately. Like, awesome, that would be great. Um, but I do think there's some work inside of ourselves around this Aquarius full moon. Things like what are the tools in your toolbox? Like the unique value that you bring to the world, what is that? What have you picked up along your journey? Aquarius, as much as it is a fixed sign, this full moon is like the sun in Leo, moon in Aquarius, and then the nodes are in Taurus and Scorpio, along with Mars and Uranus in Taurus. So there's some other stuff in there too, like in the fixed signs, so much fixed energy. Um, And that fixed energy is not typically super excited about change. But Aquarius, especially, like when we think about like the heart of Aquarius, the highest frequency of Aquarius, like it is rebelliously seeking freedom. It is not going to settle for confinement of any sort. And freedom and nothing less than that will do, not just for yourself, but that's for the collective. Like every single being deserves to own their own sovereignty. And that includes the choice to not own your own sovereignty. That's the part that like really blew my mind a few days ago, was like letting like energetic. I got this from a Matt Kahn video. I can't tell you the name of it, but off the top of my head, one of his ones. But he says that, like, you know, no matter what somebody is offering to you energetically, you can tell them, like, send this with your heart. It's actually one of the most empowered forms of I love you, is to tell them, I respect your sovereignty. I respect your sovereignty. And that includes your not accepting your own value in this moment. That includes you choosing to give your power to somebody else instead of holding it for yourself. That includes for you to make yourself your bottom priority. Like, I respect your sovereignty. Like, no matter what you're choosing, you get to choose that. Everybody in the world gets to choose their own version, like whatever they want. Like, we each get to stand in our own sovereignty, even when you don't agree with what they're choosing. And you know, you can see this is probably a big part of that fixed grand cross, because I know Scorpio's super perceptive and intuitive, and Taurus is very keen on what's valuable. So like a lot of times, like I feel like there's this protective quality that can come where we can see how good somebody is, and the fact that they're settling for things less than they deserve. We can use that love and that heart for, like, look, can't you see that, like, it's just right there and you could just claim it, and like you could just have that. And even in doing that, even in wanting to tell them, like, you deserve so much more than you're giving yourself in this moment, even that is trampling on their sovereignty to feel what they're feeling in this moment. You're trying to take it away from them by even trying to get them to feel better. You're robbing them of their moment where they, in their sovereignty, have gotten to. So it's not our place. It's not our place to charge into anybody else's reality and tell them anything about themselves, even if we can see it clear as day. And that's the part where, dude, if you resonate with this at all, as far as like being able to see people's value or potential, or like, you know, their soul gifts, like just their huge heart that they're here to offer to the world, like you can see it so easily, and they're just not giving themselves the credit they deserve. And then you go in thinking, I'm going to help boost them up. I'm going to like help them feel better. And it really is like snatching away their sovereignty to tell somebody, like, you shouldn't feel this way. You should feel different. That is running roughshod over their sovereignty to feel the shitty things that they're feeling in this moment. Let them feel it. Like, that's something that I personally am having to really wrap my mind around, because when I encounter suffering, my instant response is to want to help to alleviate it, to help soothe it, to help make it better. Not my job. It's not my task. Now, somebody who comes to me and says, hey, Carly, can you help me with this? Can I pay you for an hour of your time to sit with me and help me reflect into why I may be suffering this way? That is my task. I've been invited. I've been compensated. There's an energetic exchange of value for value. That is me being called into a situation where my skills are going to help me make a positive difference around someone's suffering. But just because I can sense suffering in another person does not mean that it's my job to care about that, or to fix it, or to tell them that they can't be there, because maybe being there is exactly where they need to be. You know, I don't know about you, but some of my biggest breakthroughs have come from utter darkness. in what feels like complete darkness never really is. As long as we're still here, like there's a piece of light in there somewhere. And in complete darkness, even the teeniest little speck of light, like if you've let your ember get down to almost nothing, it has to get pretty dark for you to be able to find, like, where is the ember and how could I start blowing on it and giving it back some life so that it can get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and light my reality back up. If I go in with my flashlight and say, oh, I see you're in darkness, here, let me light this up for you. They were over there hunting for their ember and they were about to find it. And you took it away from them, you know? Like, this is me talking to me. Like, I do this to people a lot where I'm like, oh, you poor thing, you're suffering. Here, let me fix it. Not my job, not my responsibility to fix it. And on some level, I think this is for me like the piece about the Leo new moon and the Aquarius full moon, and like realizing even deeper what kind of love we want to shine into the world and what kinds of patterns are holding us up, what kinds of patterns are keeping us from doing what it is that we already desire to be doing. And I think for me personally, I definitely resonate a lot with pouring energy into people who didn't ask for my help. And I think that's a lot of what I try to do with my family early on. Like, I tried to teach them about me so that they could understand, and they didn't fucking ask. They didn't want to learn. They didn't care to know. And like I said, like that was kind of devastating for me. But the suffering of them not wanting to know the real me, that suffering is why I took a journey, you know, like why I even set out to find who I was. And the suffering of my future mother-in-law not understanding me, like, sent me on a journey to find out who I was. So taking someone's suffering away from them isn't right. It isn't fair. And that's a new one for me. Like, it feels my older patterns and still some momentum that I have, like, it feels loving to want to help them to feel better when they're suffering. And on a bigger, almost like Aquarian type way of like that emotional detachment, that Saturn ruled, emotionally detached masculine energy of, let's look at the bigger picture of like what truly is going to be for their highest good. And sometimes, like I said, like when you have let your ember get down to almost nothing, you need complete darkness to be able to find it and revive it. So maybe that's exactly where they need to be. And letting myself feel that the most loving thing that I can do is to like leave people alone until they ask specifically for my help, to let them choose whatever they want to choose. I respect your sovereignty. And at the same time, let me tell you this is an extra cool part, is that grants me full sovereignty, right? Like, even if somebody else thinks that I'm doing it wrong, am I? Like, even if somebody else thinks that like what I said was offensive, does that make it offensive? I don't think so. Like, I think there's more of a gap between what we offer and how people receive it than we often give their credit. Like, there's so much intertwining of like what gets offered and what gets received. Because again, we go back to that lens of conditioning. What I'm offering right now is still passing through what's left of the conditioning that is gunking up my window, compared to how much of the window has been cleaned off already and is a clear channel straight through of unconditional love. So what I'm offering is a mixture of both. And then what I'm offering doesn't go straight into anybody else, period. Like, nobody else is getting a pure download of what I'm saying right now. Everybody is listening to it through their own filter. And that filter is a clear channel of unconditional love, plus whatever conditioning they haven't wiped off of it yet. So what they're going to receive, what each and every person receives from what I offer, or what anybody ever offers, is what was given plus our conditioning equals what we receive. It's a little math equation. um, for energetic impact. So when we get triggered, for example, or when somebody causes energy to rise or move or swell or flood or whatever we want to call it, when they cause energy to move inside of us, whose is that? What is this? Whose sovereignty is this touching? And I don't know, like, universal truth wise, like what the right answer is, but for myself, what I've found is if somebody moves energy inside of me, like if somebody says something that upsets me or reminds me of something that's upsetting or whatever, that is one part of the same divine timing that is always at play. So in my world, I've crafted and practiced a belief around like whatever energy is rising to the surface in this moment is ready for my attention. It's ready for me to heal it, maybe, or at least like heal a layer of it, whatever I'm ready to heal in this moment. Um, so yeah, like having somebody say something that is a little bit upsetting, is it to work out with the other person? Is it to get them to see it differently so that then you can feel better? Or is it to take the energy that was moved inside of you and to you within the relationship of like me and myself to integrate that energy, whatever came up? And I have had a lot of like wanting to help. Like I'm just saying, like it is such a profound push, like almost uncontrollable push to want to help. And just because it's like a genuine desire to do good, again, doesn't mean that it's always your responsibility to pick up that task and do something with it. And yeah, it's kind of disrespectful of other people's sovereignty, and I'm seeing that now more than ever. And as always, with almost all of the spiritual lessons that I learn, I have to end up being on the receiving end of the behavior that I normally perpetuate in order to come full circle with it and see like, yeah, that doesn't feel very good. Like I know I do this to people all the time where I try to make them feel better because they're hurting and I want to make them feel better, but really, like when I get down to it, like that's pretty selfish on my part to force them to feel differently so that I can be more comfortable, as opposed to if they don't feel good, then just leave them alone. Just don't be don't be in their space. If they haven't asked for your help or your support and they're doing what they're doing, like they're in their process, like maybe the kindest thing you can do is to butt out. This is my higher self, like talking to me. Maybe the kindest thing you can do is to not interrupt their sovereignty. And that feels like new territory. And it felt like opening up my own shadow on a whole nother level because I realized, and Brene Brown says this quote in her book, that there's a reason that, like, sometimes, well, like when people fight, like in relationships, like things get heated, like some people shut down and walk away, and some people like want to fight it out until it's over. And Brene was saying how in her family, they're the fight it out until it's over or until somebody's crying and the door slams and now it's over. And like that's the end of the fight. And she always thought that that was like the more loving thing than just walking away, was to like stay and fight it out. And that she realized that it was actually the easier path was to stay and fight it out, because when you walk away, hurting by yourself is harder than staying and fighting it out with the other person, because at least then you're like still in it together and like they're still in it with you and there's engagement, and that on some level feels better than walking away and like letting it calm down, letting the dust settle, like letting our own emotions like kind of get back into balance. And she had to like work around her own sense of like being able to like self-soothe, basically, like to be able to work with her own negative emotions in the moment, to be able to comfort herself and to not just want to project and like fight it out with the other person. um yeah, i I have a tendency to not necessarily like want to fight it out with the other person, but if I if I upset someone, especially, like if I say something that's like triggering to them and pushes them into their emotions, and now they have shadow work to do, and like, not that they can't do that, like they can and they have the skill, but I feel so bad and I just want to fix it. I just want to make them feel better like immediately, because I don't want their feelings to be hurt. I know it was my fault and I regret hurting their feelings. And that's the thing, is the regret piece. I was studying regret yesterday, in Brene Brown's book, Atlas of the Heart, her chapter on when things don't go as planned. And one of the places that we can go when things don't go as planned is regret. And what makes regret unique is that you believe it was your fault, what happened. And the only reason you regret it is because if you could go back in time, you would do it differently. And that is so true for me. And in this situation that I'm specifically talking about, like when I see that I've upset someone, I am immediately filled with like frantic regret of like, take it back, take it back, take it back, take it back. And you can't, like they say, like you can't put the toothpaste back in the toothpaste tube. Like once you squeeze it out, it's out. And now it's out and you got to just deal with it. And regret, she says, is like one of the most, if not the most productive human emotion that exists, because it prompts evolution in our behavior like no other emotion we can feel. When we sit with regret, it teaches us more than almost any other emotion can, because of how uncomfortable it is. And in order to discharge that discomfort, the best thing we can do is learn the lesson of, what would you do differently next time? Okay, good. How are you going to make sure that you actually do that differently next time? Okay, good. What do you think the subtler, smaller warning signs were that you might be able to recognize a little bit sooner next time? Okay, good. Now, how are you going to remember to be on the lookout for those warning signs? Like easing regret requires a deep learning of the lesson. And that's where I think, I know for me in the past, I would try to ease my regret by getting the other person to forgive me, by getting the other person to like cheer up and be okay again. And then I can feel okay again. And then I don't regret as much the pain that I caused them. And it is absolutely the harder path to leave them alone in their pain and to go sit in my own pain, my own regret, and to ask myself the questions of, what would I do differently next time? And to really do honestly try to learn the lesson around what caused that pain in the first place. What decisions did I personally make that caused the pain that that person felt that I cannot take back? That of course, like they're going to transmute it and use it to get stronger in their own right, but causing pain in the short term like is never fun. You never want to do that. Like you don't mean to. And it's usually like my own shadow patterns that lead me to causing that kind of pain. Because like in that example, I was fired up, I was protective, I was like feeling protective over her, and I channeled that intensity horribly. I I like, instead of like handing her this gift of like how much I care and value her, you know, handing her this tomato, let's say, I feel like I took it and like threw it right at her face. It was like, how dare you not see how valuable you are? Like, how dare you let him treat you like that? Like, Carly, 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 bless your heart. Still so much to learn, you know, about boundaries, basically energetic boundaries, which again, I feel like loops us back around full circle with the Aquarius full moon, between what is our task, what is our unique individual reason for existing and wanting to contribute on this planet, and what is not, what is a part of our sovereignty and things that are within our control and our autonomy to choose for ourselves, and what isn't. Because again, I think it's easy to have a lot of opinions about all the things wrong with the world. It's clearly a lot harder to point that energy inside of ourselves and say, what different choices could I be making? How could I personally improve the world from the inside of me out? Improve my own individual world and let that ripple out into the world at large. We have no say. We have no autonomy. Everybody has their own sovereignty. At the end of the day, we can push and push and push against anybody that we want, but their own sovereignty will reign supreme. And again, on the backside of that, give that to yourself. Feels good. Feels really good to know that, like, again, no matter what anybody thinks of your individuality, no matter what anybody thinks of the emotions that you're feeling right now, like somebody telling you that you shouldn't be sad, you shouldn't feel that way, you shouldn't doubt yourself, you shouldn't feel guilty, do not ever let them rob you of your sovereignty to feel those feelings, because they are productive. You can't cut short regret, because then you don't learn the lesson. Again, same thing with guilt. Guilt works a lot like regret, because again, guilt implies that I did something wrong. And again, what would you do differently next time? You can't go back and change it in the past, but you have power in the now to choose, how could I show up differently in the world? And possibly, right, we can never control the outcome, but if I offer something different, maybe I'll get something different. So instead of ever complaining about what's going on in the world around us, or the choices that other people are making or whatever, how can we show up differently to possibly get the outcome that our soul is really reaching for? So let's see. Uta, say more about so hard when you want to uplift people and bring more light and joy onto the planet. Probably it made sense like at where I was in the conversation at that time, but can you say more about what is so hard? And I'll come back to that. I have so much love in my heart, it hurts. Same. Can you say more about that? Because I feel like that is definitely like the Leo new moon end of I have so much love in my heart that it hurts. Yeah, it's intense. Like it's big love. And in my experience, it only hurts when it's not getting to flow. And when it is getting to flow, the intensity makes it exhilarating. So it's not painful when it's flowing freely, it's exhilarating. But if it's not getting to flow, then that backup is the painful part, I think. And so then I would want to know, like, where are you trying to flow it? And is it possible that, you're trying to use it on somebody else's reality instead of your own? I don't know. But kind of going back to that idea of everybody's sovereignty and using our own love and essentially pouring it into our own experience, our own sovereignty, our own creation, that Leo end of it, as far as like, we get to create whatever flows through us to create. So creating more light and love on the planet is easy. It's all inside of us. Like, again, I go back to, like, it's only hard when you need other people to agree with you that the planet should be all light and love. And they're not going to. They aren't going to, because they have sovereignty and they get to choose however dark they want it to be. So we can't pour our energy into getting them to feel better so much as it is about pouring all of that light and love back into ourselves, granting our own sovereignty, and allowing the freedom and flexibility of whatever energy is flowing through us, letting that be there and letting it be there no matter what anybody else is choosing. That is the part that feels, again, like kind of going back to the Taurus North Node end of embodying our own power, not needing anybody else to agree with us in order for us to feel it for ourselves. But again, that's pretty general. So if anybody has any more like details and stuff, that would probably be helpful. Not to take on others' struggles, trying to move someone else's mountain. Exactly. Like, I mean, you can try to move their mountain, but it's never going to work because their mountain is theirs. So again, it's like, are you pouring that Leo heart so full of love that it hurts? Are you pouring it into moving your own mountain? Or are you trying to use it to fix somebody else's issues? Because if that's the case, then yeah, it's going to feel bad. And that's kind of what this Saturn Aquarius full moon is lighting up for us, is where are we pouring energy into carrying other people's tasks instead of focusing on our own and focusing on the power of doing exceptional with our own tasks, of like not trying to get somebody else to move their mountain. You can't do anything in their reality, but maybe by moving your own mountain, they see what you're doing and they're inspired to move theirs. Maybe they never are. And again, none of it is your business. Whether they move their mountain or don't, like none of that is your business. And the only way that we can embrace our own sovereignty is if we're also kind of simultaneously giving everybody else theirs, like trusting other people to take care of themselves. They have their own sovereignty. And there is part of my astrology, I think it's like my 6th house south node, I want to say, in the Stephen Forrest book about the nodes, Yesterday's Sky. And he talks about like 6th house south node, how like you just are kind of overly responsible, and every time there's like a piece of slack in front of you, you just automatically pick it up and do it as part of your job. And that you can attract, with that kind of energy, you can attract people who are used to allowing other people to carry their tasks for them. And that's why, partly why it can feel so difficult to put the tasks down, because it feels like if I put this down, they're not going to pick it up. They're not going to be able to do it themselves. And then they'll have this care that's not being met. And that's my fault. And so I have to keep carrying their task. And in the book, he's like soothing us 6th house south nodes. And he's like, actually, these people that you've attracted, you are probably their best teacher, as far as like you refusing to carry their tasks is probably what's going to wake them up to they need to be carrying it for themselves. And as long as you're keeping them comfortable carrying their burdens for them, they have no incentive to change and grow and try to figure out how to exercise their own sovereignty and to choose the things that work best for them. So absorbing somebody else's discomforts does not do a single thing to help them. If anything, it stunts their growth. Dolly was telling me this story, and blew my mind. I cannot believe it. But I mean, it makes sense, like, I guess on some level. So when she was born, she was like a really happy baby, basically. And like her mom had her all like wrapped up or whatever. And before they went home from the hospital, they weighed her and she had like lost weight at like a significant amount, like a startling amount of weight. And when the doctor asked Dolly's mom about it, she said that, well, she's just been sleeping, so I haven't really fed her a whole lot because she just sleeps and sleeps and sleeps and sleeps. And basically the doctor told her that, yeah, she'll sleep herself to death. Like, you've got her too comfortable. She needs to be more uncomfortable so that she'll wake up and eat. And he grabbed Dolly by the feet and like held her upside down and then gave her back to her mom and was like, here, now she's uncomfortable. Now she'll eat. You got to wake her up. You cannot let her be this comfortable. She will kill herself. She'll starve to death while she's so comfortable. Like, it doesn't do her any favors to just let her be endlessly comfortable. So I feel like that ties in here somewhere, as far as, again, like giving people their own sovereignty, like trying to feather other people's nests, move their mountain, whatever you want to call it, trying to absorb the things that are theirs to carry. You're robbing them of their own soul growth, the raw material that they need for their own soul growth, and at the same time depriving yourself of your own. I mean, but again, like, I respect your sovereignty. Like, everybody, myself included, gets to choose to forget this whenever we do. And then we wake up in the middle of like, oh shit, I think I'm trying to like move somebody else's mountain again. So it's like a bring yourself back and then bring yourself back and then bring yourself back. Kind of like meditation. It's just a practice. It's just a practice. Can't seem to let go of my desire to live on a more peaceful, loving, and harmonious planet. Maybe that's because you're not supposed to. I don't know. I sure as shit wouldn't be letting go of that desire. Um, I doubt you could, even if you wanted to. Like, I don't know how to let go of desire. Um, I do have practice with shining a light on the resistance that's keeping you from being able to get there. Um, that can be a very productive exercise as far as like, again, even the perspective that it's not a peaceful, loving, and harmonious planet is very curious to me, because that says something about what you're exposing yourself to and what's normal for you, or what is the average of information that you've soaked up in the recent past that's informing that perspective. And as you know, as you let go of people's things that are not yours to carry and you stop looking at their struggle, the average mixture of the information that you're taking in will begin to change. And if the average mixture of what you're taking in changes, your mindset changes, your outlook can change. So thinking that it's not a loving planet is very interesting, because I do think that there's parts of it that are not, but there are absolutely parts of it that are. And it will always be a mixed bag. Again, it kind of comes back to that idea of needing to convince other people. Like, are you getting at that you need it to be like holistically loving? Like, you cannot have a single bit of suffering on the planet before you're willing to feel better? Because that obviously like is kind of counterintuitive of like, if you're still suffering, there's still suffering on the planet. Like, if you want there to be no suffering, start by eliminating your own, right? Like, that's to me like the most empowered thing we can do for anybody else, is to turn our magic inward and use our gifts on ourselves to claim our own sovereignty and our own soul's path, to stop looking at anybody else, whatever they're doing with their mountain, and focus solely on our own. What did we come to do? What did I come to add? How is the world going to be a better place because I was here? And what kinds of solutions can I dream up? What kinds of skills do I have in my toolbox that make me uniquely qualified to address these things? What is my unique mission in this world? And asking those questions, spending your energy looking into yourself to answer those questions. That's really the work that Saturn and Aquarius, I think, is asking for over this like 2.5 year period of Saturn's transit through Aquarius, but also especially around this Aquarius full moon of, you know, again, I think it's easier to look at the world and say it's bad than it is to look inside of ourselves and answer, why are you here? What is your mission? What did you come to create? What did you come to contribute? And that can be a really challenging question to answer. And so it can be like, well, I don't know. So then I give up and go back to looking at what everybody else is doing wrong and like complaining about this. And it's like, again, if you can bring it back and practice bringing it back to like, what am I here for? And how can I fill my own individual world with more love and more peace, more autonomy, more sovereignty? How can I lighten my own load? Because at the end of the day, what we choose to carry is our choice, our personal sovereignty, really, like at work, in terms of what we choose to carry. And if we choose to consume world news about problems and everything else that's wrong, that is our own personal sovereignty. And even that, like, that's your choice. Like, that's everybody's choice in the whole entire world. And that's why you cannot tie your own personal happiness to what anybody else in the entire world is doing, because they have their own sovereignty and they do have freedom and free will and encouragement from source energy to choose whatever they want. It is none of our business what anybody else is choosing. So for our happiness to be intertwined with anybody else's, like, again, it's a losing battle in my own personal experience. It's something that I had to I had to do it that way until I got tired of it and decided that my happiness needs to depend only on myself. Um, I feel like I needed to hit my head against that wall for a while, most of my life, um, before I could see that, yeah, I can't. Someone that is bound and determined to misunderstand my value or to have a negative view of the world or whatever, like coming into contact with that, it used to really tank my energy because at the heart of every interaction, I was trying to get that person to like me. And to get them to like me, I needed to be more like them. Classic Gemini. Um, and it's also very approval seeking, which also kind of feels like my Leo moon. So that was kind of my old way of I need them to like me. And so I have to somewhat take on whatever energy they're carrying in order to like kind of find common ground with them. And over the last little while, the evolution that's taking place is my energy is not dependent on whether or not this person likes me. The courage to be disliked, like it truly does set us free to be who we truly are. And that feels, again, like the Aquarius full moon and coming full circle on exercising our own full blown individuality and letting our own representation of what sovereignty looks like, letting that be a walking, talking example, a role model to anybody else who wants to look at it. But it's not my job to tell anybody else how to live their life or that they're not allowed to be sad or mad or angry or hurt or whatever. Like those are really productive emotions. So I'm really going to try to not take those away from anybody and to let them be where they are. Confusion, same thing. Like I used to have such a weight that would come on to me when I was dealing with someone who like I was trying to explain and they were asking and like there just wasn't like a resonance or wasn't like a clicking, again going back to my family. And I would just like pour and pour and pour and pour, trying to get them to understand, trying to get it to click. And now it's so liberating to look at someone who is in confusion and to just not take that on because I know deep down that I know what I mean. I know what I resonate with. I know what is true for me. I know what I believe. And I know the truth of my own personal world, regardless of what anybody else is understanding based on what I'm offering. And again, like that freedom feels powerful. Like burdens that I've been carrying for maybe my whole life that I feel somewhat like my energy is like taking flight in new ways that is dizzying, I think is the word. Like this morning I was at a frequency that after like a few minutes of being there, like I was literally dizzy and lightheaded because it was like such a shot upward of like when we truly embrace like our own unique individual energy and how that is flowing, how inconsistent, how fluid, how all over the place, how like it can be such a roller coaster, this like individuality that flows through us. And most of us are trying to fit into a nice, neat little box so that other people can understand us. And it's cutting off all of the flow of like how wild and crazy your normal energy probably is. And being able to own that felt like a homecoming. It felt like my inner being like coming into my arms and like wrapping around me and holding me. I'm like, we're so glad you're finally here. Oh, that like this is a foundation. This like my own sovereignty and letting everybody else have their own sovereignty. It's not my job to fix anything. Nothing's broken. No one's off course. No one is doing anything, that they're not right where they're supposed to be, their autonomy and their connection with their inner being will guide them in all of the ways that they need to be guided. And like, we get to be just off the hook. We get to pour our energy not into every single little thing around us that we can sense might need, improvement or whatever, but in a bigger vision, a vision that looks more like, why did your soul come into this life in the first place? What was the big picture, the long-term goal of why are you here? And if we can reserve our energy from spending it on all of the little tasks that aren't ours, all of a sudden we have way more energy on board to answer a question that big, like, why are you alive? What's alive inside of you that feels important to create and share with the world? What feels like your task? What is your mountain? When you're at the top of your mountain, what will be different? And to spend your life and your precious life force energy answering those questions and letting other people figure out their path for themselves. Myers-Briggs said I should be rabbi. What does that mean? Like a religious counselor kind of thing? That seems interesting. I was born into this world to help humanity, unconditional love and compassion. Yes. And how do you do that? Right? Like, that obviously is the $1,000,000 question. How do you do that? How do you help humanity to move towards unconditional love and compassion as more of a default setting? How do you do that? Andrea says, I was definitely impressed you pulled that off last week. I don't think I could have done it. You have the live stream last week that I had to do from my parents' house. I definitely thought about canceling. I was like this close to being like, if this is my internet situation, I don't think I can do this. I think this is the same as not having internet. And I don't know, something inside me was like, kind of like, what does it hurt to try? Like, what's the worst that could happen? Like, what's really at stake here? And I couldn't come up with anything. I couldn't come up with like any real consequences that like scared me off of doing it. And I was like, okay, so I mean, maybe I can just try and just see what happens. And I mean, I felt going into it that like maybe this will only be like 10 or 15 minutes long and that'll just be the end of it. Like, okay, have a good day. Bye guys. Like get out of here. And it ended up being almost an hour. And like so many things that I've done in my life where I faced my fear and did something that I was scared to do, my takeaway has been so many times that wasn't as scary as I thought it would be. Even him walking through there, by the third time, I didn't stop talking. I continued saying what I was saying, and I didn't even worry about how woo-woo the words coming out of my mouth must sound to him. He's practically deaf. He probably couldn't even hear me. So yeah, like by the third time that he walked through, by like 45 minutes into it, I had found my flow and my grounding even amidst this like ocean of emotion that was like raging inside of me. I had still been able to ground inside that intense experience. And again, like showing myself that there was nothing going wrong last week. Like that was exactly where I was supposed to be. And getting to see myself ride those waves and kind of like stay upright on my surfboard, like even while riding those waves, just goes to show how, like, again, I think our self-worth is positively correlated with our overall happiness in the world, that as we build our self-worth, it gets easier and easier and easier and easier to withstand the other energies that other people can provoke within us, that sometimes feel really good and uplifting, and, they can trigger us to shoot upwards and, like, feel much better. Like, that can be a trigger, an emotional influence. Um, but also their emotional influence can drag us down into depths that we would rather not go. And at the same time, we really each get to decide how we feel about feeling negative emotion. Negative, I'll put that in air quotes, because really there is no such thing as an unhelpful emotion. All of it is helpful. It's all guidance. It's all letting you know the difference between how you see it and how your inner being sees it. Um, that may or may not be helpful in this moment where you are, depending on if you can hear that or not. But once you can hear that, negative emotion or uncomfortable emotion means that your inner being is seeing the situation differently, and that if your perspective were different, AKA, if your perspective were matching your inner being's perspective, you would feel blissful. That's what positive emotion is you and your inner being are looking through the same heart, the same mindset, the same perspective, the same outlook. When you're lined up with your inner being, you feel fantastic. And when you are seeing things differently, when you have chosen to look at something differently than your inner being is looking at it, it feels like you are ripped apart from every ounce of your own life force energy, because you are. And again, that can be a very hard pill to swallow depending on how much pain you're currently in. But we each have our own full sovereignty to decide where we direct our attention, what we choose to pay attention to. And I practice this as well. Like, one of my main lessons at this point that I'm really, really intent on is, because I opened up my group coaching program. So there's even more people in my world where I have somewhat signed up to provide support for these people. And so I don't take that lightly. I carry it, and it can be a bit of a heavy load sometimes. And in my reflection, I was thinking, like, okay, so if a load feels heavy, if you're carrying something that feels heavy to you, you have two choices. One is you can put it down and be done with showing up for that. Um, if it's something where your reaction is, no, I do need to keep doing this, I do need to keep showing up to it, then my answer at that point to myself was, then we need to figure out how to make this lighter, because I can't keep carrying it the way that I've been carrying it. And if I'm going to keep showing up to it, then I'm going to have to make it lighter and more manageable for me to carry. And one of the ways that I'm doing that, at like practicing that, is like, yes, I'm here to provide support to other people, but for me, I know, and I've studied myself and kind of reflected within myself, that it takes a lot of energy to support even a single other person. And sometimes I have that energy to spare. I have overflowing energy that I can easily, like, take this hunk and give it to this person and I'm never going to miss it. Other times, my energy, my emotions are not strong enough to give what needs to be given in order to support this person. And at that point, what do you do? Because again, I'm like, I can't I can't just keep carrying something that's too heavy for me. I can't spend energy that I don't have. And so that looks like evaluating your relationship with like, what do you owe to other people? What do you feel obligated to provide to other people? And what kind of a time frame do you have yourself like committed to on an unconscious level? Because usually what I'm talking about is, okay, so somebody messages me at 4 p.m. and I'm a morning person. I wake up at like 4 a.m. So by 4 p.m. I'm like winding down for the day. I'm almost asleep. And it usually looks like anything that I'm gonna get after like 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, like, I'm not even gonna think about looking at it or listening to it or opening it at all until at least tomorrow. And depending on if I'm in like a bigger slump where my energy is really out of whack, not good, um, maybe it'll just be a few days before I can even engage with whatever that is. I can't even think about what they're sending me right now because my energy is haywire and I need to get that back in balance before I'm going to be able to offer support to somebody else. And understandably that like that's not always possible, right? Like we get caught sometimes in situations where all of a sudden we find ourselves like giving energy that maybe we can't always or can't entirely afford. Um, but at the same time, like even that, maybe like I know for me in times like that where I was responding and supporting when I didn't have the energy to be able to afford that, it usually ends up with not hitting the target with my support. It's like, yes, I responded, but does it qualify as support if it came off as like a half energized, like half cranky, like, like undercurrents of whatever? Like, are you still giving love at that point? Or are you giving like self sacrifice? And everybody gets to decide like their own boundaries within all of this. But I know for me, it has helped a lot to like really, really ask myself and create a pause before engaging with other people's energy. Is my energy ready? What am I bringing to the table? And if my energy does not feel ready or able to invest or support another person, then probably the most loving thing that I can do is find a way to resituate what I need to show up for in this moment. And again, each of us gets to decide like what's most loving. Is it most loving to show up anyway? Or is it most loving to cancel or postpone or like, wait until tomorrow morning if that's the case, or even if it takes a few days? Like, is it more loving to fill yourself back up with love and then respond from that place? And I think in my older patterns, I felt more like on the hook for like a fast, fast, fast response, like immediate response. So that they knew like, okay, I hear you and I got this and like you got this and like pump them right back up and like immediately help them. And now I really do think that it's the most loving for them if I get my own energy to as loving of a place as I can before I take the energy and respond back to them, like quality over quantity kind of thing. And that's my own personal values, like or quality over quantity. That applies to a lot of different areas in my life, friends and acquaintances, first and foremost. Um, but not everybody has to choose that. And not everybody has to choose that, like, putting it off is better. Like, you can still think that responding in the moment is really the most loving way. And that's totally fine. I respect your sovereignty. But it has been helpful for me to realize that within myself and kind of going back to that idea of what tasks and responsibilities are you claiming as yours, and what tasks and responsibilities are you letting other people own through their own sovereignty. And this this is really a reflection of like my number one task is to keep my energy in as loving a frequency as I possibly can. Not because I matter more than other people, I don't mean that at all. But if I am carrying a frequency of lack or scarcity or frustration or agitation, when I go into contact with other people's energy, that's what I'm giving them. And I personally don't feel good about that. I personally want to give love when I interact with other people's energy. And so for me, in my boundaries between me and me, not that I Matt Kahn has another video about something like boundaries are for you, they're not against other people, which that was like incredibly helpful to clarify that. But in my boundary with myself, if I don't feel loving on the inside, I know that what I communicate is not going to come across with love in it because I didn't have any love to give as I offered it. So for me, keeping my energy at a loving frequency as my number one responsibility is the most loving thing that I can do for anybody else that I care about. So, however, each individual re- uh, like has a relationship between them and what are your boundaries? What do you feel responsible for? What are your tasks that you're responsible for carrying? Every person gets to answer that for themselves. And I think this Aquarius full moon that's on August 11th is really going to be bringing to the surface the answers to those questions, whether you can kind of come up with it consciously or not. I think the unfolding around the full moon will show you what you're carrying as your tasks and responsibilities. Um, like the example that just came through is I know these people in my world where it's like there's definitely a dynamic of emotional support within the relationship that is mostly one directional, not entirely. Like they do support each other, but mostly it's person A supporting person B. And they're having this exchange where person B is like kind of looping back around into a pattern that person A has seen repeatedly, and person A has supported repeatedly the aftermath and the cleanup of like this whatever is happening here. And this time, person A is looking at it like, I'm not responsible for helping to sort out this mess that is coming. Like I've sorted it out and sorted it out and sorted it out and sorted it out. And now here they go again, doing it again, the thing that I've helped them with over and over and over and over. And again, I think it comes back to when you act as the shock absorber on somebody else's discomfort, you really are robbing them of the amount of discomfort that it's going to take for them to learn the lesson so that they don't need to loop back through it again and again and again and again. They're doing that because last time, yeah, it was painful, but it wasn't that bad. And it wasn't that bad because person A is the shock absorber that's helping it to be bearable at least. And then there's no like real consequence. There's no lasting memory of an unbearable amount of pain because the emotional support that the other person provided helped it to be easier. So person A gets to decide, do I want to continue to be there and be on the hook to support and support and support and support the same thing over and over and over and over again? Or do I want to let them figure it out for themselves? Do I want to let them feel their own suffering, as hard as that is, as hard as it's going to be to not be there and not help lift them back up? Again, like, is it the most loving thing to let them have their own experience where they can feel for themselves what they like and what they don't like? They can feel the full weight of the choices that they've made. And like each of us individually, we can only offer the love that's inside of us to offer. And if we're so concerned with propping up other people, we're depriving ourselves of keeping our frequency at a level that is truly going to convey love energetically to every single person that we meet. And it's a work in progress, absolutely. I think maybe for the rest of my life, like I definitely don't know what the end of all of this looks like because um, it does just continue and continue and continue to unfold as far as what am I here to do? What am I here for? Like why did my soul feel the need to manifest a body and come here for what? And the more I sink into myself, my sovereignty, my self-worth, the more I can feel like the Aquarius reminder. Where did that go? You are capable of doing big things and life is full of beautiful possibilities. Like, I'm feeling more and more and more when my battery is fully charged, when my gas tank is on full, like how when you really fill it up and it's like past the full line, like I'm a different version of myself. I am like the best. I mean, all of me is worthy, all of me is unconditionally loved by my higher self, but there's a version that exists where my batteries are fully charged, where I am able to offer a potency of love onto the planet that I'm simply not capable of when my battery's at 15%. So again, it's like strategically speaking, this is a very Aquarius type mindset, that bigger picture, long-term view for humanity's sake. What is the most loving thing that you can do for humanity in the bigger picture, grandest scale of your own personal contribution? What is the most loving thing you can do? And I personally think that the most loving thing that we can do is to love ourselves and to be able to use that self-love to open it up like a bubble and invite other people who are ready to feel it for themselves to come in and experience it vicariously through my energy. And I'm not always there. I don't always love myself. Sometimes I am in severe self-doubt still, even recently. And that's not wrong either. Like feeling self-doubt isn't wrong. It shows that we're moving to higher and higher levels where I don't have any experience. That's why I doubt myself. I'm at a level I've never been at before. That's why I doubt myself, because I have no experience to back it up. Confidence comes from experience. So if you're at a new level with zero experience, self-doubt is par for the course. And if you don't have self-doubt, think about what that says about like just yeah, charging forward and not caring about how it lands or what it causes, or is it actually good in the net effect for the planet, or is it harmful? Like, I think self-doubt is healthy to a certain extent. It can absolutely get to a level where it's holding us back. And again, it's important to think about, what do we ultimately want to do here? Like, what is the love that we want to shine into the world? And then also, what are the patterns inside of us that are currently keeping us from doing that? And systematically working backwards through those patterns so that our energy can flow more and more and more freely. Hopefully, you know, maybe not being the shock absorber for others. Brilliant. Yeah. It's not our job to prevent them from their suffering. Like, if they are in a moment of suffering or anger or confusion or sadness or whatever, like, none of that is wrong. None of that is wrong. And taking that away from them does limit their experience. And it may feel kind in the short term, but I really don't think it is in the long term. It feels like I'm embracing it. I want to call it tough love, but I feel like I don't really deliver it in a tough way necessarily, other than the fact that I'm maybe more willing to speak to others' areas of improvement if they ask me, you know? Like I said, there's a big difference between somebody who is saying, "I wish the world were different," and somebody who's saying, "I want to be different. I'm ready to be different. I'm ready for these things in my world, my personal real life world, to be different. Can you please help me? Can you please help me see how I'm holding myself back?" And in that moment, my answer every single time is a resounding hell yes. Of course, I will help you. I would be honored to help you, but I am nobody's shock absorber for their suffering, and especially the suffering that people soak up from other people. Because nobody built my boundaries inside of me, and all of the energy that I've soaked up from other people along my path, like, the suffering of doing that is what led me to build those boundaries that I now use, to where I'm able to pivot off of somebody else's suffering, as far as that is not my task. If they ask for my help, I can even offer my help. Would you like some help? If you would, come holler at me and I'd be glad to help you. But again, most people in suffering, like, they're there for a reason. I know back in my depressive, like, decade and a half, like, nobody could tell me that it wasn't that bad. Like, nobody was gonna get through to me. Like, I needed to go through that. I had layers of my own healing journey that needed worked through. And in that suffering, I realized a lot of things. Like, it was a very valuable experience for me personally, to find my own edges, to understand what worked for my energy and what absolutely does not work for my energy. And to learn all of that, it took, like, Jody said on one of our heart to hearts about how, um, the way that we figure out where our boundaries are is by having them crossed. So when your boundary gets crossed and you don't feel good, and then somebody else swoops in and makes it all feel better, you don't ever build up an ability to, like, stand in your own sovereignty and declare your boundaries and possibly stand up for yourself if you need to. If somebody else is the shock absorber or takes away the hurt, yeah, it kind of cuts the process short. So I'm I'm realizing that, like, trying to end other people's suffering, like, maybe isn't as noble as it sounds. And that maybe that's just one more way that we keep ourselves disconnected from our own happiness. Like, when we think about, like, well, I can't feel good yet because there's so many people in the world who are suffering. I mean, I gotta wonder, I'm very curious, like, are you sure that's why? Are you sure it's their suffering and not your own that is the problem? Because, yeah, I mean, it's easy. It's so much easier to blame other people. Like, that's how Brené Brown defined blame in her first TED Talk. She said the research defines it as a way to discharge pain and discomfort, is that we blame it on other people or other things or whatever. Like, I'm sad and I'm upset and hurting because the world is a mess. I mean, maybe, maybe, maybe not. Maybe that's what you're attributing it to because it's easier to say that that's the reason than to recognize that there are patterns of the way that you're engaging that is adding to or exaggerating the world's situation, or some of the world's situations. Because again, I'm like, I'm not going to deny you that the world is kind of crazy right now, but that's also not the whole truth. And it's like, which version of the truth are you choosing to buy into? Because choosing to buy into the world is bad, that says a lot about the way that you're taking in information through the lens of conditioning that Aquarius speaks about, where the way we believe the world is basically what we end up seeing. So again, it's about reorienting our attention and finding, like, not even necessarily like focusing on the world, but more using what you see in the world to help teach you about what is the gunk that is still on your filter. Like, when you look out at the world and you see that it's awful, that says a lot about what's on your filter. And it's not about getting the world to be different. It's about cleaning some stuff off your filter. So, making a filter, making a filter. It's biodome. That's funny. Um, yeah, yeah. It's all okay. It's all okay. Nothing is going wrong here. We're all learning along our path. We're all exactly on time with where we meant to be. The mission that we brought forward is exactly on time. That just because we're feeling bad doesn't ever even mean that we're off our path. Because there have been so many good things that have come out of suffering. Like just yesterday, I was looking at this thing that said because the COVID vaccine was developed so quickly, like the status quo process for vaccine development like wasn't going to be good enough because we needed it faster than that, and that because of like that pandemic forcing that process to evolve and like come up with a better way, there's now like a novel approach to vaccines that is going to like this science, this methodology is going to pay off in all of these different areas of research and development, that now we have a new process. And depending on where you are, you can look at that story and get off into the track of like COVID wasn't real, or like the pandemic, blah, 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 or like it wasn't handled correctly, or so many people died and that's awful and there's so much suffering and that's awful. Like you can get sucked into that, or you can hear that out of everything can come something good. Like nothing is all bad. There's always a silver lining. There's always, I mean, it's duality. There's always like the light is equally present to the dark. They're in balance. So to look at the world and say that it's not good isn't fair. It's half of the picture. And again, it says more about the individual saying that than it does about the actual world, because each and every one of us are having our own subjective experiences based on the conditioning that we've picked up along our path. That conditioning that Aquarius wants us to unravel and wants us to sit down the parts that aren't really us so that we can take flight as the version of ourselves that we truly were born to be. Mm. Attachment has been coming up so much, so much, like attachment. Attachment. I feel like that is a perfect word for the Scorpio South Node and everything that is coming up to be released around how we feel attachment towards things. How, again, it's like when you feel attached to somebody else's outcome, when you look at the world and deem that it's suffering and it shouldn't be, or that it's suffering and it was this person's fault, and now we're mad at this person, you're out in that territory where you're trying to create an outcome in somebody else's reality, which just like doesn't ever work. Like we only have creative power inside of our reality, and our reality can absolutely ripple into the reality of other people, but we can't directly create there. And so this feels like an opportunity to detach from the outcomes of other people, to let them own their own outcomes. And if that feels difficult, it makes me curious of kind of back on that Taurus Scorpio end of like the detaching and kind of standing in your own power. Like that's the Taurus end. If it's hard to detach from other people's outcomes, I would be curious, how much of your power are you getting out of them achieving that outcome? Parents, when their kid gets into Harvard or whatever, it's like, or their kid was supposed to go to Harvard and decides he wants to go backpack around Europe for 2 years. Like, and the parents are disappointed or mad or whatever. And it's like, yeah, I mean, one, that definitely having an emotion about somebody else's experience is a good sign of attachment. And two, why are you attached if not you were trying to source some of your power from them achieving that outcome? And so again, it's like, where is your power in all of this? Because if we can't feel good because the world is doing things we don't like, we're leaving our power out here into the world instead of claiming it for ourselves. And with that power, choosing to withdraw our attention from things that are not our tasks to carry, things that are not our reality to be creating in. And that's up to us to get to do at any time. And it's not right or wrong to be attached or be detached. The only difference is that being attached to somebody else's outcome is going to make it a rough fucking ride. because you can't do anything about it. And it's not your business. And usually it has to like show you, it has to like go off in this completely opposite direction just to prove to you that you do not get to create in the life of another person. They have autonomy, they have sovereignty. My power exists to create in my reality, and that's okay. Right? Like getting kind of distracted by other people and what they're doing. Again, I don't think that's wrong because I think it does take us into territory where we can get some emotions stirred up, some guidance, some usually uncomfortable or negative emotions where, again, that is showing us that we are looking at this differently than our inner being is looking at it. Like we get mad at someone, and that is showing us that our inner being isn't mad at them. Our inner being doesn't feel that way. Our inner being is still loving them, and that's why we feel so bad because we're not. And so it's all about like one step at a time. One step at a time, recognizing what is it that you truly want? Like the Aquarius bigger picture, what are you here for? What do you want to add to humanity? What, like when you're standing on the top of your mountain that you came to climb, what will be different? What will be better? What will change as a result of you getting to the top of your mountain? Most of all, you probably, but maybe some ripples that you're hoping for in the world. Um, and then with every ounce of your energy, as much as you possibly can, pouring that energy back into creating what you came to create for humanity. You know, it's easy to forget about loving humanity when we have a single suffering soul standing in front of us. It's like the single suffering soul can easily take precedent over the highest good of the collective. Like the right now presence of suffering is extremely compelling. And with that, I've had to, like, one of the self-soothing pieces that I've used with myself is to kind of like wrap myself up and be like, oh, you have such a big heart. You have such a big heart. You have such, oh my gosh, you care so much. I love that you care about the suffering of like essentially every single person on this planet. Like you truly do want the best for everyone. And that's not wrong. That's so admirable. That's so genuine. That's so innocent. And my higher self's like, don't ever lose that. But you can only optimize what you offer. You cannot optimize what anybody else takes from what you're offering. So orienting ourselves in this world is a very Aquarian dynamic because in the early stages of Aquarius energy, where we're born into a box, essentially a little box of how we're expected to behave and perform and gender roles and on and on and on, all of the expectations of who you should be in this life. And then over the course of time, basically by being that, we put ourselves into situations that don't feel good. And in order to heal from those situations that don't feel good, we find I never should have been in that situation to begin with, because that is who I thought I should be, not who I truly am. And if I put myself where I like what matches who I truly am, when I'm there, it feels good. So through suffering, again, we're back to suffering, like through that suffering, through the uncomfortable feeling of feeling like I don't belong here, it sends you on a journey to find where do you belong then? Like, what do you want? Not just, I hate this, this isn't right, but okay, fine. So then what would be better? What would be more to your liking? What would be a closer match to your energy? And answer that question and practice that vibration and let that practice attract people into your world who also match that vibration, who are wanting the same things that you're wanting. Like with the full moon coming up, we have a full moon heart to heart scheduled for Sunday for me, Jody, and Maddie that we'll record, and it'll be out on the channel on the full moon on August 11th. Well, maybe what day is that? Yeah, I think we'll probably just release it on the 11th on the full moon. That'll be Thursday of next week. So yeah, I am super excited to get to come together with them once more and have that conversation, whatever it will be, because we have such uh I feel like this exists at a high frequency of Aquarius is like when you drop into your individual essence of like who were you born to be? What did you come here to contribute? When you are honestly knowing that and then putting yourself in situations where it matches that which you honestly came to contribute, I feel like these two, we have such an overlapping mission of love. There's such mission bonding in between these 3 points of energy, the 3 of us, where when we come into this space and we pour our love for humanity all together into this space, each of us walk away like more energized than ever before. Not that the 3 of us together are doing anything to help humanity. I guess I take that back. I mean, we record our conversations and put them out there, and I think people like watching them, but it's still mostly each of us as individuals in our own individual experience doing our own individual contribution around like who did we personally come into this world to be, and this once a month coming together and sitting in this place of shared mission of adding more love to this planet. It is truly an opportunity to put some gas in our gas tank, put some charge on our battery so that we walk away knowing that while we are each our own sovereign individuals, there are other individuals in this time and space that resonate so closely with the mission that we brought forward. They're like soul sisters and brothers in these missions where even though Aquarius sounds like individual, it sounds like alone, and definitely like a more shadow side of Aquarius is like loner, emotionally detached, kind of aloof, apart. Um, at its highest frequency, it is deeply embedded into not just any community, but your literal soul tribe, the people with whom you share a mission on this planet. Nobody said you got to do your mission all by yourself, but you do have to find it by yourself. Nobody can give you the seeds of your mission. You already brought them with you. They were in there. You brought it all with you. It's all in there. So yeah, I do think that this Aquarius full moon will be a beautiful time of unfolding as far as each of us moving forward along the path of shining a little bit more of our own personal divine light out into the world. Um, Maybe people get nice things out of it. Maybe they don't understand where we're coming from. None of that matters at all. It is a very much like a radio tower almost, where you're broadcasting a signal. It's not a walkie-talkie where you're waiting to hear from the other end what the reception was, how did this come through on your end. It's like the people that are in the vicinity, they'll get a clear message. The people that are on the edge of the signal, the strength, they'll like kind of get a half clear message. They're probably not going to fully get it. And the people that are out of range, they can't even hear what I'm saying. So, like, I'm just a radio tower. I'm just a signal out into the world. I'm just a frequency holder. I just hold this dominant frequency of love inside of myself. And I show up into spaces that feel like love. And I be myself, which is basically love. And I watch ripples of love move through the planet that weren't there before I put them there. And anybody who ever wants to say that like putting yourself first is selfish or like self-care is selfish or whatever, like I truly think that there's a space at the top of Aquarius energy where it is strategically important to be at the top of your own list and to invest that energy into holding the frequency that is most important to you, because for the benefit of humanity. Because for the benefit of all of us, we're all in this together. Like we all suffer and we all love like together. Like it's energetic soup. I mean, we're all sharing the same air, we're all sharing the same energy, we're all sharing the same time and space. We are truly in this together. And I think as much as anything else, like the Aquarius full moon is asking us like, what do you think is the most love you can pour into the planet? And whatever you come up with, I would say do that. And do it as long as it works. And if someday you decide there's something a little better that you want to try, then do that. and do that as long as it works. And yeah, exercise your sovereignty. Find the spaces and the crevices and the unexplored edges of that sovereignty. Where does it end? Where do other people's sovereignty begin? All of this is beautiful territory for this Aquarius full moon. I do think that I'm going to leave it there for today. I'm going to go and feed my belly. It's very hungry. Um, until next time, dear friends, I do hope that you take such good care of yourselves, and so will I. Okay, bye.